Al-Qaeda may not have been involved in Libya, according to that article, but the situation described in that New York Times article is very frightening and still kind of underscores the vulnerability of U.S. interests overseas. Brian Williams is a professor of Islamic history at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth and a contributor to the Huffington Post. He's joining me now via Skype from Dartmouth. All right, good to see you. So what is your initial reaction from that New York Times article removing responsibility from Al-Qaeda?
Well, it sort of proves that this has happened before. Throughout the last 10 years, there's been a widening of the definition of Al-Qaeda. Over and over again, this word has been overused. And certainly we see that this New York Times piece, which is very, very well researched, seems to indicate that it wasn't Al-Qaeda at all, that it was a local Libyan jihadi named Abu Qatala who had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda.
But instead, according to the article, took advantage of the fact that the American preacher did demean, insult Islam, and that perhaps this was the result of that video that made air.
Absolutely. What it shows is that, in many ways, Susan Rice was correct. It sort of vindicates, in some ways, her statements 5 days after the attack, that the catalyst for the protest was actually this inflammatory video called the Innocence of Islam. That this was actually what catalyzed this sort of almost spontaneous attack, not some premeditated Al-Qaeda attack.
So what does this tell you about the vulnerabilities of U.S. interests overseas and how much prevention can really be expected? How much protection can really be put in place?
It sort of highlights just the sort of double-edged nature of this Arab Spring. You know, I think the ambassador, Christopher Stevens, really seems to have trusted the local Libyans, that we, in many ways, helped against Gaddafi. And it was these very Libyans we helped with the bombing campaign that turned against us. So it sort of highlights just how volatile the Middle East has become since the Arab Spring.
And now turning to Russia, let's talk about this suicide bombing attack taking place just 400 miles or so away from the place of the Winter Olympic Games in February. What does this tell you about, I guess, how tenuous security is in the country of Russia, given that this attack takes place just 2 months after a very similar attack involving a suicide bomber?
Well, it sort of shows you how determined